Welcome to Make Things That Matter, the podcast where we explore impactful products and the cultures that create them. I'm your host, Andrew Scottsko, and if I'm doing my job well, each episode of this show will help you to do meaningful work, make things that make things better, and have a great experience doing it. Well, I am delighted to come back to you from my recent sabbatical and recharge time with my guest in this conversation, Kenny Borg. Kenny has spent more than a decade as a founder and a CEO operating and advising direct-to-consumer brands. And more recently, Kenny has co-founded Ethr, which is a coaching collective that I think has just one of the most beautiful intentions for what they do. Ethr is a coaching collective that exists to help people develop a relationship with their own consciousness and to actualize wisdom. And one of the things that I really love about Kenny that I think comes through very clearly in this conversation is that he really is a perpetual student of master teachers across a variety of traditions, in particular, the indigenous peoples of the Americas. That is one of the facets of who he is that I think is most distinct compared to many other leaders or coaches or entrepreneurs that you'll come across. And it's something that I think is really unique to him and that you're going to really appreciate, as I do. Now, in this conversation, we explore deeply a lot of the process of personal and professional transformation and change. We explore identity formation and reformation, more importantly, how to discover what you want, and also how the way we show up, live, and work is evolving as we all emerge from this crazy time of the pandemic. There's a lot of things I could say, but I think rather than that, let's just get into it. So please enjoy Kenny Borg. Kenny, welcome to the show, my brother. How are you today?
Thank you, Andrew. Doing great. Awesome to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. It's such a pleasure. You know, we've gotten a chance to get to know each other a bit over this last year or so. And in a recent conversation, it was just so obvious to me that we needed to get you on the show here. So I'm just thrilled we get this time together. So thanks for carving out a little bit of time.
Of course.
And you've got a lot of exciting things going on that we're going to talk all about. But I thought it'd be fun to start just kind of getting to know you a little bit for the listeners. You went through a really interesting transition from my perspective, from being a D1 college football player to an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping you could talk to me a little bit about what that transition was like, because I can imagine that was a huge shift for you on multiple levels, not just in how you're spending your time, of course, but also in really like probably I'm assuming your real, like your self-identity.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Major identity work with the athlete shifts out of being an athlete. And, you know, I think most people play some sort of sports growing up in our culture, in Western culture. So it's something that everyone battles on some level. Not everyone, but lots of people. And for me, you know, just to take it all the way back, parents got divorced around 13. And so for me, football was like the stability throughout that experience. And they had a pretty lengthy, not so pleasant divorce for my brother and I. And so, yeah, I found football and just poured everything into it, you know, found mentors through that, you know, coaches, good forms of masculine leadership, father figures, father archetypes. And so just kind of, you know, found support and stability and stuck with that, poured everything into it, was able to earn a college scholarship to play at Fresno State as a defensive end there. And it was my complete identity. And as I know you may have heard or experienced yourself, athletes in college, you know, it's all you do. It's who you are. And everybody thinks they're going to the NFL, myself included. So, and only about, you know, 1% of athletes or college football players actually do go to the NFL. So we're all living into this dream that we're going to make it and we're going to be the guy. And most of us don't realize the harsh reality of it until, you know, we have been pushed out into the job market and our athletic dreams are crushed. And only at that point do we start thinking about the identity that we might want to create for ourselves outside of being an athlete. And sometimes it takes years for post-college athletes to even get to that point. Yeah. And I have friends that, you know, they went and they stayed and continued to try out for the NFL for like 3-4 years after and just found side hustles and work to keep them going, to keep the athletic dream alive. And there's not a whole lot of talk about this in college sports. Some schools more than others. And especially in this day and age, universities are doing a lot to pour into their athletes to help them develop themselves outside of sports and develop a mindset for post sports in college. But when I was in it, there was still very much the, you know, we're all going to the NFL dream was alive and well. And so, yeah, the disappointment of that was tough. And for me, it ended with a career-ending injury, a couple of ACL tears to the same knee. So I was actually fortunate in hindsight to transition all of that energy I was putting into football into business. And ended up starting a business in college. So then that became my identity.
Yeah.
And we could talk more. We can talk more about the journey of identity construction as an entrepreneur and all the pros and cons of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating place to start this exploration together, because you said something in passing there that I think is common in our culture, but is also, there's a lot of depth there that I want to push into a little bit. So, you said that like as an athlete, it's what you do, but it's not just what you do, it's who you are. And I think that's endemic to our culture, right? Like American culture in general, I would say, very much embraces that idea, particularly within the sort of the world of entrepreneurship. How do you feel a through line there? And like, how do you, reflecting on your own identity transition from being an athlete, like that was dominant in your reality, and then shifting that multiple times since, how do you think about that now? Do you still hold the identity in the same way, or do you now have kind of a different relationship to what you do?
Yeah, well, just to reflect and play off of something that you said, the athlete becoming who you are and the identity, it's more than that. It's really, you're not the athlete. So you're becoming something that you're not, and you're assuming that identity. And then it's really a process of actually at some point deciding, oh, I'm not this person. I have a different person inside of me who's more authentic, and exploring how to build a relationship with that. So that's really the journey. I think it translates directly to entrepreneurship. And it took me a long time as an entrepreneur to, start to tap into, my personal identity, the narratives and stories that I had about myself, and start to really like take hold of those and craft those. And it's an ever evolving process for sure. I mean, still to this day, it's like the pinnacle of my self work is, how do I step into my most authentic, highest expression? And, what tools and peers and coaches and whoever on my team is supporting me in exploring that. But the work never seems to end. And it's all completely related to that major athlete identity that I assumed for so many years, and still continue to unpack that. And I would say at this point, I've come back to it and said, hey, I'm really, really grateful for everything that football taught me, and the leadership qualities, working in team dynamics, performing under pressure, like all these really, really incredible life skills and assets. But there was a while there where I, really repelled it. There's also a lot of toxic masculinity in the culture of football. So that taking a lot of years to unpack all of that and, feel safe around men again, and feel like I could relate authentically with men in a way where I wasn't, being judged or put down for making the wrong move. So psychological safety very low in the locker room. So there's a lot of dynamics at play. But at this point, right, like it's been well over a decade, very grateful for all of it. And now tapping back into that part of my life, and knowing that like there's a lot of people there I can support that are walking the journey of an athlete and making that major identity shift. And identity shift is one of like the major topics that I coach on, identity shift and transition. And so it's all informed by the journey that I've walked, myself as an athlete and an entrepreneur.
I think it's pretty rare that we step back and we actually look at our identity as constructed and as the outcome or the output of a process that we're participating in, whether we're consciously participating in that process or just kind of along for the ride. But you very clearly have done this intentionally, at least after a certain point in your life. But you mentioned there where like you're not the athlete, but then you decide to become that athlete. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about that, like that deciding to build an identity, because I could see that process being translating really well to entrepreneurship, to art, to, fill in the blank here. Yeah.
Well, becoming an athlete, I don't think is as much of a decision as it is just how you're finding meaning and belonging at the time. It's everything that our culture says to do is be good at sports. And, getting a college scholarship for sports is like the biggest form of success at the age of 17 or 18.
Yep.
So not a very conscious decision, but felt great, friends, family, everyone cheering for you, coaches, school's super proud of you in high school. And, all of that was really an unconscious progression and part of my path. And then there was a certain point, beyond football as an entrepreneur, that I decided, okay, how much of this entrepreneur identity have I assumed that was created for me by others, right? Where I try to step into being like person X, Y, and Z, or aspire to achieve what they've achieved. And then like really starting the process of asking myself, is this identity that I currently hold for myself actually me? And if not, how do I explore what my true identity might be, or what the identity I want to create for myself is, and how to even develop a mindset around identity so that we're not really pigeonholing ourselves to one way of being in the world, but taking a more, expansive, open, ever evolving approach to how we relate to ourselves and how we see ourselves and think others see ourselves.
I'm so fascinated by this, and it's such a timely thing just in my own life. You and I have talked about this offline in terms of my own evolving identity, and I'm in a phase of my life where I'm in, I'm deep into a transition and a sabbatical. So I've been exploring many of these questions, which is part of the reason I'm so fascinated by this right now. So it's, even selfishly, I'm asking, and so I really appreciate you being willing to discuss that. Let me offer this, and then we can see where it takes us. But like one of the things that I've noticed in my own process of the last, call it 8 months, has been this tension between the what you were just describing of, okay, wow, like I am examining the identity I have taken on, that I've put on like a shirt, and saying, what about that's authentic to me? What's real? What do I want to keep? What do I want to let go of? But then, and there's a lot of fluidity and kind of flux in that process. Certainly like internally, there's this, you can feel like this vortex of just what the hell's going on. And so I think the question I'm getting at here is either for yourself, or I know you've coached a lot of folks as well. When someone's in this transitional process, how does one find a bastion of stability? Right. Something that can be their stability, their refuge, their whatever you want to call that, amidst all of this changing, swirling around them, or at least that's what it feels like experientially. So I'm curious what that opens up, or what you've seen there.
I mean, the big thing that's coming through is just, it really all comes down to your relationship with yourself and how you navigate such things, right? As identity and the big questions of who am I? Where am I going? And you mentioned the word ritual. That's definitely a big part of my life. I think everything is a ritual if you choose to relate to it in that way, right? People talk about morning rituals. Well, morning rituals at this point are like, what biohacks and apps can I use to like make my time most efficient? And, the actual meaning of a ritual is like, it's a sacred act of, connecting with something, yourself, something greater than yourself, others, whatever the intention of that ritual is. And I think having a relationship with ritual is a way to create, personal stability in your inner landscape, and feel like you have consistency in things that you relate to that are always with you through the process of self-exploration, identity creation, expansion, the highs and the lows of all of it. So that's what comes up for me. Definitely a big part of my life.
How would you distinguish routine and ritual? Because like all the biohack type stuff, you hear people talk about their morning routines and the whatever 7-minute morning miracle or whatever the case is. So what is it that really makes what transforms something from a routine to a ritual?
Intention, really. Am I approaching this? If coffee is a morning ritual for you, are you really being with that coffee, or are you just like subconsciously drinking the coffee? Are you smelling the coffee? Are you like letting the aroma into your body and feeling it in your cells? Are you setting intentions for the day into that coffee? So you're infusing it with that intention, and then, actually bringing it into your body. Are you noticing how that coffee is making you feel as you drink it, as it warms your throat and warms your stomach and your body? That to me is ritual. So anything with intention, it is the simple intention makes it ritual. Are we listening? Are we paying attention? Are we connecting at a deeper level than just going through the motions of routine?
Sounds like a combination of let's say presence and also intention, or maybe just put them together and say intentional presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting, I think we've got a beautiful jumping off point. I want to start to jump into the main stuff I think we're going to explore today, which is everything that you're building and exploring with Ethr. So I've had the privilege of getting to know you off this show, but for those who haven't, could you just really quick, like what is Ethr? What is this all about? And set a stage for us, and then, we'll jump off from there.
About 3.5 years ago, as I was starting to make my transition out of being a CEO and an entrepreneur, I basically decided I'm going to continue to be an entrepreneur and start another company. But I hadn't assumed that identity yet. I was really, really like repelling the old identity. Like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur anymore. I don't want to be CEO. I want to be a coach. Right.
Okay.
So I went to coaching school and started to get clients as I was still, a full-time CEO. And at a certain point in that process, I realized I don't just want to like jump into a new domain without community. Community has been everything for me as an entrepreneur. And in terms of my, work, play, how supported I feel in everything that I'm doing, it all comes down to community for me. So I decided to start my coaching journey by building community from the very first step. And I aligned myself with other coaches that I found inspiring in the space. I sought them out. I was always asking everyone like, hey, who's your coach? Connect me with them. I want to meet them. And through that process, I met some really, really, really powerful coaches that were just at similar or maybe a little further along in their journey to me. And they all came from different waves of experience in terms of the industries they've played in, the types of roles that they've held in those industries, and their journey of what brought them to coaching was different as well. And that's really what started to create the foundations of Ethr, is how do I align myself with peers in this space that really inspire me, who I can learn from, through and with. And, I'll leave it there for now. There's obviously a lot more to explore, but that's created a powerful container for exploration for us professionally in the coaching domain. And I'll share more in depth as we continue, about what Ethr is becoming and where we're heading from here.
The first thing I just wanted to explore there was anybody can be a coach, but I can say from my own experience, both working with coaches and also having met, you and some of the other Ethr folks, there's something different going on there, right? Like, I've met a million coaches in my life, but there's something different going on with you guys. And so what I'm really curious about as a starting point is, what are those like central questions that are pulling you forward? Because I feel a difference around you all when I'm around the Ethr folks. Like, I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's this very intense, like, pushing energy that entrepreneurs often have, or many entrepreneurs classically have. But I don't feel that around you guys. And when I say that, I don't mean you're not motivated. I don't mean you're not ambitious. I just mean it feels more like you're being pulled by something or by several somethings. And so I'm curious what that is, because I can feel it energetically with you all. But what are those questions, or what is it that you feel pulling you all together and then forward?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Andrew, for that beautiful reflection. It feels really good to receive that.
Of course.
And I know all the Ethr coaches who you spend time with care deeply about you as well, as do I.
Thank you.
And in terms of those questions, I think it really has started with choosing to do it differently than we've done it before in our careers for all of the coaches. And so for me, the first question was like, how would I do this differently? What did I do in the past with my past ventures that I don't want to repeat here? And what you just spoke to, that like constantly pushing entrepreneur mentality, grinding it out, workaholism, all of that, I wanted to completely remove any potential for that happening. So what I did was gave us essentially an infinite container of space to explore and play together. And the way that materialized in practicality was a monthly call with these coaches. And then, very often, once a month or several times a month, I'll do one-on-ones with each of them to just kind of like further nurture this idea of Ethr and what it even is. And all the while, like we have full rosters of coaching clients in our practices. We're sending referrals together. We're collaborating together. We're doing, workshops, corporate offsites, retreats. All of this is happening, but not with any intentional, like, here's where it's going. And the LLC was formed in the beginning, but we haven't had any business plan or clear vision of like where this goes from here, because we've intentionally chosen to be in that exploration space of like, let's play and create together, with limited strings attached, and just see what comes up and see what feels good, and continue to ask ourselves like, what does feel good and what doesn't feel good here. And eventually that's leading us to getting to a more structured, like, here's this business's plan and strategy, and here's what it looks like over the next 12 months and beyond. And we're getting there now, but it's taken us 1.5 years to get there.
Wow. What really strikes me about that is the trust, right? And I didn't think I was going to say that, but what I mean is when I thought about creating things in the past, there's almost a frenetic, almost manic quality to it. And what strikes me is so different in what you just said was I was just listening to you and I'm like, wow, there's just this like undercurrent background of trust that it feels like is holding. I'm imagining you all feel is like holding you in this process, because I don't know how else one would step into such a nebulous process and allow it to emerge rather than feel like you had to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I can't speak, for all the coaches because we're all on our own individual journey. But at least for me, it's really been a sense of being proud of myself for what I've accomplished in my career. And, I'm very, very privileged and fortunate to have a breadth of clients that allows me to play and explore without a bunch of concern for financial stability. And, that's true for most of us. So the way that the stars aligned for us and where we were positioned in our careers it gave us the space to be able to enter in this way with a lot of curiosity. And I think the key to doing that was like actually recognizing that we already have made it. Like we've already done it. There's nothing more to achieve. We don't need to try to get to the next big milestone. Like just really being in our success. And I'm not talking like we've, exited companies and done all this, like made a bunch of money. It has nothing to do with that. It's like we're good. We're good where we're at. We have lives that we're really, really proud of, and really honoring that and being able to recognize that and celebrate that together. Like that's the best thing you could ever achieve, I think, right there. So essentially starting with the destination that most people strive to get towards being the foundation of the project.
I can imagine people listening to this are like, okay, Kenny, tell me more. Like, how do I do that? Because that sounds really good. So how do you do that? Like, because it sounds like that was a conscious choice to say, you know what, we're going to start from not to start with the end in mind. We're going to kind of emotionally, experientially start at the end, and then things build and emerge on top of that foundation. So how did you actually go about that? Because that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately as coaches, having been gifted with skills through our training to be able to ask the questions of what is it that I'm doing all this for anyways? If I get that big promotion or, or making a big salary or sell my company, what does that get me? Like what next? To what end? And so really like helping our clients and ourselves to paint that picture of what is it that success brings. Is it freedom of lifestyle? Is it comfort? Is it great relationships? Is it flexibility in schedule? Just really getting clear on that stuff from the beginning and knowing what that is so that you can actually recognize that you have it already. And maybe you don't. And then it requires some cultivating. But I'm a firm believer that there is nothing more to do or achieve. There's just recognizing how great our lives already are. And I speak from a place of tremendous privilege in saying that, and that's not everybody's reality, but it is mine. And if I'm going to have, any impact on benefiting others that are less fortunate, then the first thing I need to do is recognize that there is nothing more for me to do or achieve than just to tap deeper into myself and bring that forward, with the intention of being of service, which is what coaching is really about for me and the rest of the Ether coaches, I think.
In our conversations, both explicitly and implicitly, the theme of service has really been a very clear through line in all of everything I've ever heard from you. And it's something that I think is really, I first of all, just want to acknowledge and note that.
Thank you.
What is it when you think about, for you personally, like for Kenny, not for Ether, not for all the things you might create, but for you personally, like, what is it when you think about the service you want to provide? How do you articulate that for yourself?
Let me sit with that for a second here.
Sure.
The service that I want to provide really is an authentic embodiment of fulfillment. so that I'm an example for the people that I work with, and both as peers and as clients. That's it. And I think that's everybody's job. And I do believe that human nature is authentic, is naturally good. And most people want to be of service. They just haven't quite determined how. And in many of our cases, myself included, we have a ton of competing priorities and responsibilities and things that we're, seemingly striving to achieve that helps us get distracted from our path to higher levels of service. And so just really committing to that embodiment of authenticity as the first prerequisite to like intentionally serving in any practical ways. That is the beginning for me of thinking about like how to show up in service to others. How do you show up in service to yourself first? Like how do you become whole so that your cup is full, right? Your cup is full to pour into others from there.
Yeah. And what about Ethr?
Yeah. So, with Ethr, of course, structuring, all types of different business models and really basing them on exactly what I just shared with you, right? Of everything that we do, whether it's a one-on-one coaching container, a group coaching container, a retreat, a corporate offsite, any of our various programs that we're coming out with, all of them are focused on really supporting people and stepping into their highest expression, which, first means that you need to prune the weeds in the garden. I can't just plant more flowers in a garden full of weeds. And so really identifying what those weeds are and doing that work to, dig deep and uproot those things. And that is the process of how we approach personal and professional development. And, it's all connected, really sinking into yourself and identifying, instead of taking on, more courses and more trainings and more coaching, it's really just getting the things out of the way that are really at the foundation of everything that you do. And so the service that we're providing is, containers and coaching relationships to support and nurture people through that process.
What's an example of that? You said it's not necessarily about going and taking another course or a training or whatever, but it's sort of this clearing away of the things that are in the way. What are some of those things that commonly show up for people?
Most of it related to negative self-talk, back to our relationship with ourselves. Do I love myself? Am I mean to myself? Am I comparing myself to others? Do I have imposter syndrome? Do I believe in myself? These are the things. These are the limiting beliefs, right? That everybody has. And I still have them to this day. And, I've had the privilege of working with incredible coaches, and still, I still have stuff coming up. I had stuff coming up before this podcast. Like, oh my gosh, Andrew's like so much smarter than me, and he's so much more accomplished than me, right? And these are the things that come up in my mind, and I get to look at those. I don't believe them, but I get to look at them, and I'm pretty freaking smart. But
what's really funny is that I had the same stuff come up before this podcast about you.
I love it, man. And that's it, right? Because none of that is true. That's our mind playing tricks on us, trying to keep us safe. And so that's the example I can provide, is like everyone has that stuff. What is that stuff for you? And let's talk about it, and let's be free and open with it. And, vulnerability is, I think, a foundational component for how we coach, and, a way of being that we hope to encourage everyone we work with to step into.
Yeah, man. It's so, I don't know the right word, but it's so funny to me to hear you say that. Cause as I said, I literally had the same stuff about like accomplishment come up with you. I was like, oh man, Kenny's done like so many cool things, and he's up to, all the noise just in the head. It's so funny. But the thing that I am really curious about, so first of all, thank you for just opening that up, because I didn't even realize I was holding that either until you said it. And then I kind of felt it release. So thank you. The thing I'm wondering is, you talked about negative self-talk and imposter syndrome. And I can think of 4 different conversations I've had with people this week where those were clearly at play, both either for me, for them, or for both of us, especially the imposter syndrome. And I think that's something that like everybody experiences at times. How do you deal with that yourself? How do you coach people to move through that?
So I think the beginning steps of that are really spending time with what it is that you're comparing yourself against that makes you feel like an imposter, really exploring that, taking the time to do some deep work around what is it that I'm thinking about specifically. What are the top 1, 2, and 3 most repetitive thoughts in my mind that have me feeling like an imposter? And those are the things, right, to really understand before you can start to ask yourself, what is it within me actually that knows the truth that none of that matters, and I know who I am, right? And I have magic to bring to the world, and no one else can do it like me. And, if it's hard for someone to believe in themselves like that, that's where coaching can be so supportive. That's where community can be so supportive, is to get those reflections of how the world sees you, but you don't happen to see yourself. And I think that you and I just learned through our little exchange there that, my perception of you is very different than your perception of yourself. And usually others see us in a much higher light than we see ourselves. So I really like to use reflection from others as a tool. And I encourage my clients to go and to get those, right? To reflect on ourselves and to get reflection from others, because it helps us see ourselves. And if we don't take the time to reflect, then of course our brain's going to latch onto all the things that have us feeling like an imposter, because that's all that it sees in the conscious mind, without a deeper dive in space to explore and get curious.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things that I'm personally going through in my life that I'll just throw out there, because I have a feeling, just based on all the conversations I've had with other people, I think a lot of people are experiencing this right now, is a real, I was going to say questioning, a real questioning of a lot of things, and a reevaluation, kind of charting a new course, whatever metaphor you want to use for that. And one of the things that I'm finding for myself and others that I'm in conversation with that's coming up a lot is a challenge of basically like knowing what you really want. Like, so when I really think about it honestly for myself, that's been one of the hardest challenges that I continue to deal with, is like discerning what is it that I really want and what is just, an idea that society put in my head, or that, the person I talked to 3 days ago, like it just sort of got planted in there. How do you approach that question, either for yourself, with your clients, whatever? Like, how do you help people to tap into that? Because just again, going to your notion of reflection, you, in the time we've known each other, have really struck me as someone who is very centered in yourself, very rooted in yourself, what you believe, what you want, more so than many people I meet. And so, I sort of look to you as an example of that. So I'm really curious, how do you think about that for yourself or for others?
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Well, yeah, it just strikes my curiosity of, I think it's different for everybody and how they explore that. And we're all at a different point in that journey of identifying what we really want and bringing awareness to the things that we have or that we're working towards that we don't actually want, and even recognizing that we don't want them. I think everyone's entry point into that work is different. It might be a transformational retreat. It might be coaching. It might be psychedelics. It might be surfing one day with a beautiful sunrise, and you just realize, like, hey, I want more of this and less of working in a box with lights shining on me all day looking at a computer screen. Right? That was definitely part of my journey, was that experience. So yeah, that's how I think about it, is like recognizing that everyone's in a different point in that journey. And the way to start is just ask the question, what do I really want? Most people aren't asking that question. And the majority of humans spend their entire lives not asking that question. And we're at this really, really, really special day and age and point in the course of human, existence, where that question is being asked more often. And it's really beautiful, I think. And I think it's really special to be alive at this time, where I would say the consciousness of our species is really evolving quickly. And that's a more normalized question now. And obviously we have the pandemic to thank for that in a lot of ways, of all the things that we went through to be able to examine, what's working for us, what's not. And at the same time, there's tremendous repercussions affecting society and our economy coming out of that kind of pause that we took, right? The pause and the time to actually realize that things aren't working for us anymore. Well, now we have a whole set of new issues where we're trying to get back to business as usual, and organizations and teams are having a really hard time getting through how to be productive again when people are still being with that question of, what do I really want? Is it this? And there's a ton of resistance, I think, between employee and employer right now of how to grab each other's hands again and start walking in a path that feels more aligned for everybody and supports, both the organization and the people within it.
I really resonate with what you're saying there. And I feel like I'm seeing it everywhere around me, and most people I talk to, there is this real active exploration and reconsideration of like, even if we restrict this to the professional domain, of what do I want? What do I want this to look like? What feels good to me? What feels aligned to me? And, I think the reality is that's happening not just at work, it's happening across their lives, but we do spend a very large percentage of our waking lives involved in our work. When I'm really curious, like you use this word consciousness, and that's a word that I'm very fond of on multiple levels. And I really dig it and I mean that, like, I'm down with like the woo woo versions of that. And I'm down with the sciencey versions of that. Like I like all of them. But I'm curious, when you point at that and you describe kind of this shifting consciousness that you're perceiving and experiencing, how does it show up? Like, what are you seeing?
Well, one, it's really what you just described, that I like to call it the spectrum of woo that we might apply to the word consciousness, right? Like, what does that word make you feel?
By the way, a quick, I am stealing that for sure. Spectrum of woo, I am totally stealing that. I will try to give credit, but I may forget.
I stole it from someone else, but yeah, please use it. You're free to use it. And so that word consciousness, it's becoming more familiarized. I definitely wouldn't say that it's normalized yet. And it makes people feel something. And depending on where they're at on the spectrum of woo, it either makes you feel good or it is off-putting in a lot of cases. And just to get right to the point of this whole thing, the whole purpose of Ethr is to help people build a relationship with their own consciousness. That is why we exist. And I don't say that publicly, and it feels really good to say it on this podcast, really for the first time outside of our circle of coaches. As I say that might strike some as like, oh, what the heck does that mean? Yeah. This is on the woo spectrum. This might be too woo for me, right? And we're coaching, professionals and business leaders at the highest levels. So having a conversation around that starts with, well, what is consciousness? And everybody definitely has a different explanation or definition for that, by how they relate to it and what it means to them. And that is what Ethr is. It is the exploration of that. And the scientists all are baffled at what this word means, right? No one can really figure it out. Where does it come from? What is it? Even the quantum physicists are stumped. They can't figure it out either. So it's a process that we all get to be in together, of learning more about this word and this thing that is consciousness. And, my hope and my wish for Ethr and for our contributions to the world is that can be a really, really positive exploration and relationship that we have with that word.
Thank you for sharing that. I had never heard you say those words before, but I kind of felt it. And so there was this moment of resonance when you said it. I went like, that's it. That's the thing that I've been getting from, like, feeling from Kenny without like having it articulated. So it's really cool to hear you say that. And that's beautiful.
Yeah, man. Thanks for pulling it out of me.
You're kind of going back to doing a callback to what we said earlier in this chat. It's an exploration. Right? It's an open-ended exploration of this word. What does it mean? How does it show up? What is my relationship to it? And then the answers to all of those questions are always evolving themselves. So it really is this open-ended journey that Ethr is, as I'm starting to understand it, really a vehicle for this journey. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we're not using that language with our clients yet. It's kind of, there's a saying in coaching that you give people what they think you tell people you're going to give them what they think they want, and then you really give them what they need. And that applies, I think, in this context of, the idea of consciousness and exploration of consciousness being essentially the future of coaching as we see it, and finding ways to be bridges to talk about that in, very professional settings to where the language is approachable and accessible for people. And of course, breaking that down, what does this mean, this exploration of consciousness thing? Well, it starts with the many decades of incredible literature and research and science that goes into personal and professional development and coaching. None of that goes away. None of that goes away. It's just there's an evolution of where we go from here. And that's really what we're exploring with Ether. And consciousness just happens to be kind of the North Star for us as we see it right now.
That's so fascinating to me, and I look forward to exploring this with you and all the ways that we'll support each other in this journey, because I think that is, in many ways, that's the journey of all of life. One of the passions you and I connected on our last walk was this idea that organizations really can be vehicles for that exploration. We were talking about the idea of an everyone culture and like a deliberately developmental organization. Yeah. And when I think about this, that's sort of the most, I could say, widely accessible language I've found for this. What are you finding? Like, what's working?
Well, I think to your earlier point about, DDOs and everybody culture, that is, I would say, the highest form of, approaching this that exists today. Thank you for sharing that with me, Andrew. Actually, as soon as I started talking about it to one of the other Ether coaches, I had to gift him the book. So I haven't even got to finish reading the Everybody Culture yet. But yeah, I really think that's as far as we've gotten of being able to enroll everybody in an organization in this process of radically developing ourselves. And, even through the challenge and kind of the pain that can come with that sometimes. It is painful to admit when we're wrong and what we're wrong about and where we have to grow. It can be. And that concept of, deliberately developing ourselves as a culture within an organization is, I think, incredible for that. And it's still, there will be in 50 years a whole body of work well beyond this idea of a DDO, right? And so that's what we're curious about at Ether, is exploring what is that domain. And I think, to put it really simply, we've done a great job with, the top research studies and scientists in the world when it comes to human development, all chapters of life. But the domain that we still have to explore is, if we've done a really good job in like the mind and body domain of exploring everything going on in that mind-body connection. We're now talking about brain-gut connection, and really, like, for the first time. And that's a huge, tremendous opportunity to further research in neuroscience. There's also the spirit, right? And mind, body, and spirit is a kind of an uncharted domain, at least as it relates to the science and studies that have been done and connecting the dots on those. And there's definitely, some leaders that are exploring that space. There's not any generally accepted body of work to explore the spirit, right? And Ether is not claiming that we're going to be the ones to do it, but we are going to be a part of the conversation. And our goal is to align ourselves with others who are interested in this exploration and doing that together. And I think that, people collectively are. The idea of spirit, when I even say that word, much like consciousness, might make you feel something, but I think people are ready. I think people are ready to talk about, what does that mean for me? And how can I achieve success in life, success in business, success in my career by being more in touch with my mind, my body, and my spirit?
That's a perfect segue. I want to start to kind of shift us and close out here a little bit. But one of the things that you said there that I really loved and I wanted to push in on a little bit is this notion of success. What does that look like for you? Like, how do you define it for yourself?
I don't relate to that word, to be honest with you. I've explored my relationship with the idea of success. I think it can be really a motivating word, and it has been for me for many years. But if we dig into it further, like, what are we trying to succeed at? And if you break it down to, I want to hit this milestone and I want to get to this point in my career. I want to, buy the house. I want to get married. doing any of those things, does that mean success? I don't relate to the word in such a way that it is indicative of achieving some certain level of feeling successful. I like to feel successful right now, like at the highest level. Right? That's what it's all about for me. So yeah, I've been as successful as I can be already. I already am. And so everything that I want to do in my life, I have reasons for doing those things, but the reason is not success.
I love what you just said, and it reminds me of an earlier conversation on this podcast with a woman named Laura Garnett, who wrote a really great book called The Genius Habit. And it's really about finding your zone of genius, right? And one of the things she said to me when I asked her that question has always stuck with me, and I think it's exactly what you're pointing to. She's like, well, I'm already successful, and I have an expanding vision.
Yeah.
These are not contradictory terms. Like, one can be successful in this moment and be creating and aspiring to more.
I love that.
What if fulfillment was part of the journey and not, something you thought you were going to pick up, like a prize you're going to pick up at the end?
I love how she thinks about that. Really, it feels like not working towards anything that we don't already have, and relating to the expansion, relating to the ongoing creation as just, an evolution of the journey and an opening and expansion of that creative energy, if we can use those terms. That's definitely how I like to think about it. So it just becomes a journey, and it becomes fun, and it becomes an evolving form of our personal expression and how we express, in personal and professional parts of our lives.
Totally. So, this idea of fulfillment is important. It's important to you. It's important to me. I think everybody actually is seeking that, even if, they are calling it something else, right? If they're aspiring after the job or the house or the car, the whatever, ultimately everybody wants actually to be happy and feel fulfilled. What I'm curious about is how to make this come alive on a day-to-day basis, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. So I'm wondering if you were advising the person listening to this right now, what would you advise them to do in terms of helping them to feel successful and fulfilled all along the way? Is there a question you'd start having them ask themselves? Is there, what would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I would suggest just taking a personal inventory on kind of the pillars of your life, and the pillars that I would use to really look at and say, like, hey, how am I doing in this domain, this part of my life? How do I feel about it? What would I change, add, or stop doing in this area? And for me, those areas really are, our relationships with others, our community, really, like friends. So the people that we relate to in a non-intimate way, and then your intimate relationship or relationships. So those two elements of relating to others being tremendous. And then obviously we have career, we have finances, we have health. And then at the middle of all that really is the self. So, and to me, that's where the spirit would come in, right? And of course, mind, body, and spirit all apply in that domain of the self, but much of that also falls in like the health category. So just looking at all of those different pillars of life, recognizing that at the middle of all of it is us and our relationship to ourselves. And just going through that exercise is something I do, once a quarter at least. And it really helps me get clear on where I'm at and where I'm tracking in terms of my personal fulfillment. And even just like the looking at it and recognizing, I didn't realize until I wrote this down that this is how I was feeling about my finances or about my health or about my relationship with my fiance. And oftentimes it's much better than I actually recognize. So that to me is a really good way to find some easy fulfillment, is just to take the time and the space to be in reflection with some of our major life pillars.
Totally. I love it. I'm going to yes and that. And the other one that I really hear from you, or actually I want to say it differently, that I really receive from you, because you said something earlier in this conversation that I want to acknowledge that from my perspective you're doing, was you talked about embodying fulfillment and authenticity, right? And I think that word embodying is very important, because it is distinct from talking about it, thinking about it, whatever about it. there's just being it. Mm. And the thing that I really get from you and the time we've spent together is a quality of trust and of gratitude that I think is actually what's underpinning what you just described. Because it's one thing, like I know a lot of people who have done a personal inventory who are real unfulfilled. And so I think my yes and would be, and can you approach that inventory from a place of trust and gratitude, which is what I actually experientially get in our dynamic.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I love the reflections that you offer, Andrew. You have a real way of bringing out qualities in people that they're not seeing or feeling in themselves. And I think trust and gratitude for sure those are, values or virtues that I think about often.
Yeah, it comes through.
Thanks,
it comes
man.
Through.
Thank you. Approaching life with gratitude is a helpful precursor to fulfillment, I think.
How do you do that? Because I think everybody by now has heard be grateful, have a gratitude practice, something like this.
Yeah.
We all know that's a good thing. How do you do it?
I'm a big fan of Atomic Habits, the book, James Clear.
Okay.
Big inspiration for me. And just the idea of habit stacking is something that he talks about, and the opportunity to really build things that you don't yet do into the things that you already do. So for example, I eat food every day, and I now take that time before I eat my food to express gratitude for, the food, my life, the beautiful day that I've had, the incredible people that I might be with. And that's it for me. I used to have a morning gratitude practice, and then it became another task and thing that I had to do. So when I finally started, following James Clear's advice and habit stacking, it became just part of my normal eating ritual. And it's built in now, 2 or 3 times a day. And it made it really easy to not even have to think about it. And now it's, subconscious automated behavior.
I really dig that. And, there's a book I meant to mention earlier when you brought up ritual early in this chat. Have you ever read The Power of Ritual?
No.
I think you'd love it. And I think the plug for it is, well, I think you actually just gave the perfect plug for it. It's this idea of how do we infuse our lives in a holistic sense with a sense of meaning and ritual in many moments, not just, I think many people hear the word ritual and they think of some big grand ceremony or something like that. But I think it's the reality of it, I think is much more what you actually just gave a great example of. And it's a book I found really meaningful over the summer that I just wanted to throw out there for you and for the listener. So
thank you. Yes, I haven't received a bad book recommendation from you yet. So yeah, I'll check that one out, and I'll go through all your show notes from all your episodes and pull out all the great books that you've actually yet to recommend me directly.
Just ask me. That'll take you too long. All right, cool. Kenny, I want to start to close out here with a couple rapid fire questions. They're quick questions. Your answers don't have to be quick. They can be whatever length feels good to you. And they're just things that I find interesting to ask folks. One of them is if you could go back to the start of this chapter of your life, or if you're in a transition of chapters to the start of the last chapter, and start again, knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
Part of me wants to say nothing, because, there's a lot of value in everything and all the mistakes. But for the sake of giving you a good answer here, I would spend less time on social media. That shouldn't surprise anybody, but it's taken me a good long time to really kick my relationship with social media being non-beneficial. And I'm really grateful to be at a place where, through social media fasting, I've been able to separate myself from that, but definitely too many conscious hours of my waking day spent there, and didn't receive as much as I put into it in terms of time.
And yeah, +1 to that. I've yet to find let's say a mutually supportive relationship with most social media. So it feels usually like a one-way street, and I'm on the losing end. So I hear you on that one. Who or what would you say has a big influence on you or shaped how you see things? Are there any figures in your life that really shape you or you carry with you as you go forward?
Yeah, definitely. And I've always had a hard time answering questions like, who are your heroes, or who do you look up to? And there's definitely qualities of people that I look up to. I look up to many qualities in Elon Musk. There's many things about Elon that I don't aspire to, be like. To me, my biggest influence by far has been spending time with indigenous leaders from tribes in North and South America, and just being having my mind and my world open to an entire different way of being a human being, and to see how they embody values and virtues and how they lead from a very different way than we do here in the West has been very insightful for me, of just knowing that like there is another way, and it doesn't have to be the way that I choose to follow, but there's certainly a lot to be learned from things drastically different from everything that we know, and they do exist. You just got to look a little harder sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you, that's on the more on the woo end of the spectrum of woo. And I think a lot of people might go like, oh, I don't think it needs to be there, but I think a lot of people reactively will think it's there. Are there any either people or books or resources of any kind that you think are good accessible starting points for someone to start to tap into this indigenous wisdom? Because I think there is something really amazing there, and a lot of people may be looking for like handles to kind of start to engage with that. Yeah,
there's a lot of really incredible books written from Native Americans in particular who. I grew up in California, and this is Native American indigenous land that we're on. So I think that's a good place to start if you're in North America. And there's a tons of incredible resources out there. One author in particular, Joseph Marshall, who's the author of The Lakota Way and The Power of Four, which is Native American leadership book, basically. So it was recommended to me by a Native mentor that I have, who said, like, if you want to learn about leadership, then you read this book. And it's about Crazy Horse, one of the last standing leaders of the Lakota tribe, and essentially how he led his people through really tumultuous genocide and period of time in which they were being chased by colonizers to eradicate their people. And it talks about how he led and how he participated in the process of those battles and that really hard journey as if he was not any sort of a leader. And really being a leader that was talked about more towards the end of his life and by his people after his death, as opposed to him ever relating to himself as a leader. He was just one of the people, and he was just doing, what he felt he was there to do.
All right. I love it. Thank you for that. I'm going to go get that book myself. That feels like exactly what I want to read. So Thank you for that. So just in closing out here, Kenny, where can people find you? Where can they engage with Ethr? Like, if people want to follow up and go deeper with either you or Ethr coaching, et cetera, like, where should they go? Please
so our website is ethr.us, ethr.us. And my Instagram is Kenny Borg. Those would be the two best places to find us.
Perfect. All right. We will make sure all that stuff is linked in the show notes. So everyone, if you want to go deeper, please do follow that. And then Kenny, just in closing out, what would you like to leave the listener with? I would leave
the listeners and myself with the question, what have you found today that's beautiful?
Thank you for that. All right, my man. Well, it's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, and congratulations on bringing Ethr into the world and starting an exciting new journey that I think we're all going to benefit from.
Thank you, Andrew. So awesome to spend time with you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this, I'd be so grateful if you could do me a favor and take about 25 seconds to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That helps me reach way more listeners, and it also helps me bring you more great guests. As always, please feel free to reach out to me anytime at connect@makethingsthatmatter.com. And until next time, my friends, leave them better than you found them. See you out there.